It's 3:30 and I'll call the meeting to order. This is a special work session for the Independence City Commission along with the Economic Advisory Board. Chuck, would you like to call your board to order?
I'd like to call a meeting of the Economic Advisory Board to order.
Yeah, our first item on the agenda is a work session. A work session with the Economic Development Advisory Board to redefine and clarify future grant criteria. I thought after we had awarded our emergency funds grant that it'd be a good time to get together to kind of recap what we did and then look at the whole process. Again, not that we'll need it soon, but I thought with the unknown circumstances that seem to be going on in the world, we're not for sure what will happen, and if we need it again, let's be prepared with a program that we've looked at and worked out the rough edges that we had so that we can look at different situations too, the different types of applications. But you know, this was with the pandemic, but is it something that if we had weather related, a tornado, is this something that maybe we should look at having economic development funds to help sustain businesses through that time, and also then reach out to new businesses? But we don't know what's going to happen, and it's better to be prepared. I thought for the short time frame that we had, that everything went together really well. You know, we can always look back and find things that maybe we should have considered, but considering how fast we had to act, I thought it went really well. I think everybody got in, came together, had good input, and it was a good plan that the city needed. And one thing for sure, economic development is maintaining our businesses that we have now, just as well as reaching out to bring in new, because if we lose what we've got, then it's twice as hard. Now we've got to get two. So with that, let's just have some feedback. What you've heard, what you think about the process, any ideas? I guess Kelly will be taking notes for us. So let's just open it up for discussion then. First, on what's your responses that you've heard from the grant program that we had?
And I met with our retailers and our restaurant owners starting last week in small groups of 10, and we probably had 4 or 5 meetings with all of them, and at every single meeting they all expressed their appreciation for the money that they had received through the grants. So I just wanted to express that to the commission and to the advisory board, how appreciative all of our small businesses, restaurants, and retailers were.
Good. Chuck, this was kind of your idea to bring it to the commission to use economic development money. Are you seeing potential? Are you satisfied with what we were able to do? Or
Yes, I think I'm very satisfied. I've heard a lot of very positive comments from the business community. I think it was really a shot in the arm to a lot of them that were feeling a sense of urgency and despair about their situations, and it helped get them through a really rough time. And I think given the charge that the Economic Development Advisory Board had around the scope of the project, I think we met met those targets and goals appropriately. I do know that, so I think what I mean by that is I think given the criteria that was set forth to deliver the program under, I think we did that very well. I do know that there were some folks that felt like they were left out. And I think that there's some lessons to be learned from that in establishing the attributes and the criteria for any program that would follow after this. There are, in every situation, certain businesses or potential applicants that you can make a case for fitting into the program, no matter what the program's outline or criteria is. And I think the committee, I wasn't able to meet with the committee that awarded the grants on that one day because we were busy with a project at the bank. But I understand that they used as much flexibility as possible to try to include as many businesses as they could within the constraints that they had to work with the grant outline. I think for future grants, given the goals, Kelly sent out some goals that we had talked about to ensure that the money is invested locally, to make sure those funds are distributed to those with the greatest need. I think what we'll have to do in the future is just really look at what the situation is and define specifically what it is we're wanting to accomplish. And try to design, learning from this grant program, what went well and what we could have done better, design the program criteria around trying to meet as many businesses or folks' needs as possible within the budget constraints that we have to deal with. Always keeping in mind that the goal has to achieve the greater good, and recognizing that no matter how hard we try to make the program applicable to everyone, there's unfortunately always going to be someone that falls outside the scope, and that we'll try to avoid that to the extent possible, but we to some extent have to have thick skins about that because we can't spend weeks and months trying to design a program that'll include everyone and then have a lot of folks fail while we're talking about that. To your point earlier, I think for a program as large as this was, as complex as it potentially was, to get it in place and rolled out as fast as it was, to have the cooperation of the advisory board and the city staff in developing and implementing and executing a plan, I really do think it was a home run. I know a few people think maybe there's a foul ball or two in that at-bat, but I think overall it was a home run and well done, and the greater good of Independence was served by it.
It's always hard when you respond so quickly to consider every possible situation and every need and how to get the word out. And I think that's something that we'll have time to look into the future and maybe address some of those issues that will be better prepared. Of course, for this to have happened, your knowledge of the incubator building fund and the concept with it, the situations when a business is looking to relocate, that the building, if you have one waiting, there's always a problem with it. They might be too big, too small, too tall, too short, floor slab not heavy enough for the load, so the program wasn't as effective as originally believed, but yet we had, $350,000 in that fund. And by knowing that, to come up and be able to use that at this time really was the deal maker for the grant program, that the funds were there and were not coming out of any existing account, and still let us keep our economic development fund pretty much intact. I think, 35,000 or so, we look to complete the 400,000 we talked about using. So looking into the future, I think we could try to determine a budget amount to have for emergency funding that wouldn't take away from the other areas that we see that we need to have economic development input into. At the commission meeting, I mentioned with the renewal of the special use sales tax that we might have an opportunity to take a portion of it and designate it for economic development money to supplement what we're receiving from franchise tax. So, there's some things, we're at the planning and brainstorm stage for future uses of an emergency program. What we hope to do is, look at the steps that would come up to establish a grant, and these are tasks, of course, for your Economic Development Advisory Board to look at and bring back the categories, how it would be subdivided to targets, a review process, guidelines that would keep us consistent and yet flexible for the needs. A typical application timeline that if we have time, that we're looking, with the pandemic, I think it grew to a proportion that none of us were ready for. We heard it coming, but we didn't know what it would do, how it would impact our community, how it's impacting the world even today. So, there's a lot to be considered. Some of the other committee members, what's your thoughts?
I have a couple thoughts. I've been part of the process of making the selection. First off, I'd like to thank that Kelly and especially Lacey really helped us through this very well. Your organization and the way she organized the spreadsheets gave us a good way to review it. A couple comments about it. I think we took the approach. We knew we had, I think 80 was the max that we were able to do based on the funding and how we established it. But I think when we went through the process, we took let's see who we can add to the group as opposed to who we could eliminate. So we did look at each individual application in some sense. We took them as a group, but then we went through the ones that maybe people weren't sure about. So I thought it got a thorough discussion. What I would say, though, is it was awful tough because we had a time constraint. We knew we had to make a decision, and we had to make it at that meeting. And so in the future, that would be a positive to try to extend the time. The other would be nice if we'd had the whole group involved. It was awful tough that there was 3 of the group, and then we had the city staff helping us. But since we're a committee and a team, it would have been better to have everyone's input. But again, the time constraint put a limit on that. The other thing is, and Chuck kind of mentioned it, the scope. We had guidelines from the city, and that helped, and that's what we used as a basis. But if we could have defined that or had a little bit more ability to have some more give and take with that. Leonard represented the commissioners, but it was somewhat limited. If we have that, and that's another reason to better define it going forward, I think we could have even been better positioned to do it. But I felt good about it. Going in, I was very apprehensive, and I felt very unprepared. But the list we had and the way it was organized helped us. And I feel bad for those people who feel that they missed out or we didn't consider them properly. But on a personal note, I'd like to hear who that was, not by name or something, but like a group or something if we missed, so that we could understand better next time how we could think of it differently.
I might suggest that in a subsequent meeting to this, to your point, that we take all those applications that were not selected and review them to see how they might be included or how we might reframe the criteria in future programs that more of those folks might be included. Find out why they weren't included, why they thought they should have been, and see if we can't create some additional flexibility.
I would agree totally, and I can honestly say, though, as the group, the ones that we did eliminate, we did discuss. So those, some of the ones we selected, not all of them were discussed, but definitely the ones that were eliminated, and that would be a good learning process for us.
Yeah. And we might learn that we can adapt the criteria somewhat to make it more inclusive, and we might also learn that was the right decision, that they didn't fit the program and what the goal of the city was in distributing those funds. So I think it will be a good we will do that at a future meeting, and I think that will be a good learning experience for future grant programs.
Yeah. One other suggestion I'd make is you should be there next time. I would have personally appreciated that, but other than that, it was fine.
Yeah, I apologize. I was the people that write my check needed me worse.
Yeah.
Chuck, you might want to also include in that group the ones that we got phone calls from afterwards that did not apply because they were not aware of the grant or thought they didn't qualify, so you might want to review those as well.
Yeah, we will. I think maybe in future, if we do have a future program, we can encourage everyone, even if they don't think they will apply or they don't qualify, to go ahead and apply anyway and let us make that determination. There were some folks who said they just weren't aware of it until the time had passed. And I have mixed emotions about that. We worked really hard to identify communication channels to get the word out to everyone possible. We used Main Street, Chamber, social media, newspaper, email blast. I don't think we left any stone unturned as far as getting the word out. So I think we fulfilled our responsibility on trying to communicate that to the business community. And I don't want this to sound as a criticism, but they also bear some responsibility to stay informed. When their business is in jeopardy, they should, and I'm not saying they did not make an effort, but they need to reach out. They need to reach out to the Chamber. They need to reach out to Main Street. They need to reach out to various organizations to inquire, to make the Action Council, to inquire what help is available. And all of those organizations will bend over backwards to provide them with all the information that they have available to them and help them in any way possible. But it's unreasonable to expect those organizations to make some sort of a door-to-door campaign or to hold people by the hand. And again, I don't want that to sound harsh, but we have a responsibility to do our best to get the word out. But the business community also, the business owner also bears a responsibility to try to seek out help. And we will provide that help, but I think it's a mutual responsibility.
In the future, it'll be a little different, because the Economic Development Advisory Board has been, what have you had, 2 meetings before this? Is this your
We started
third or
in
fourth?
January, I think, didn't we? Did we start in January? I think we started in January, Mayor.
Okay, so this is your 5th meeting, and the direction that we've been looking at the advisory board going isn't the traditional role that it has been in Independence. We're looking at maintaining our businesses and our industries here as much as looking to reach out for new. And I think traditionally we've looked at trying to bring in and build new industry here. So yeah, I think it's going to change. Now people, the business owners, will look to economic development within the city. What can we do? So, for everything going so quick, what was it? Within a week, we had the application deadline set on a Friday for the following Monday. And, you know, everything is changing, that it's not an excuse, it's a reality. We did the best we could. Our desire was pure to reach out to as many as we could. And now we're learning, and now that the businesses will look that in this time, that to consider contacting the Economic Advisory Board, to contact the city to see what our plans are in the situation also. I think that's why it's really important that we don't just stop and say, hey, we really met some needs, but let's go to the next step and see how next time we can do it again and how we can grow from there. Because, I see some things that if I was looking to start a business and, you normally have the incentives to bring you to town, but now Independence is going to have a plan to keep me here and to help me through the battles. I think it could increase our appeal and some of the other things that are going on, that, it's going to really be a draw completely, not just you want me here now, but then you're going to go look for somebody else to bring in. No, you're going to want me to come here. You're going to work with me to build my business. You're going to work with me to maintain my business. So, we'll form a partnership with our existing businesses and our new businesses. But, I think that's some things that you as the Economic Development Advisory Board can take in and brainstorm together and put together these plans to come back with us. Commissioners, too, enter in, please.
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you for all the hard work that everybody put in to make this happen. In the short time that this program was implemented, was it going to be a perfect plan? No. I had talked to a couple people that for some reason didn't hear about it, and I just said, the reality of it is, even the money that we set aside, I said, there isn't any way that we could actually reach out and touch everyone in all these, whether it's retail, restaurants, general services, professional services, go down the list. We didn't have that kind of money allocated to reach out and touch everyone. And I'd made that comment a couple of meetings ago, and I told him that. I said, think about that. And look how many businesses we were able to provide some assistance to. And yes, there are some out there that for some reason didn't understand or didn't take the time to fill out an application or ask about it. But we try to help as many as we could. We did it in a short time, and that's something that cities don't normally do anything quickly in a short time, generally. So, and I think after I talked to them, they understood that. They understood. It was a good faith effort. We did the best we could in a short period of time. And the purpose of this work session today is to refine some of the direction that we had established and trying to make it more, see how it can fit and maybe be a broader appeal and make that available to where if we do something down the road that more people will be able to at least fill out an application and become part of the inclusivity that we're trying to do. But it's definitely a team effort. I mean, everybody has to work together. The city, all the boards, in order to make this work. We have to keep who we have here and help them, in addition to bringing on people that are looking to come here. And that's a never-ending cycle. I think what we're facing now, this may be something that may be the new norm down the road. These hurdles and these problems that continually come up to the surface, we'll continually have to navigate through and deal with. It's just going to be part of all communities, not just Independence. So that's my comments.
I have a couple of comments that I would just reinforce. First of all, how fortunate we are to have an Economic Development Advisory Board at this point in time, that we had put the board together and that it was ready to function, so that when the opportunity arose, when the crisis arose, we were able to respond to it. The funds being in place, the right people on board really made for us, gave us the capability and opportunity to respond to the crisis. But also this reinforces how significant a role not only the attraction of new businesses, but the preservation and growth of our existing businesses is to economic development. And so I would reinforce that and say, as we begin programming and planning for programming amongst the for the economic development of Independence, that we also build a robust plan for our existing businesses, and that we continue to encourage their growth and expansion within Independence by economic incentives of this kind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lori, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I so appreciate the city staff and the committee's efforts. I have to say, I feel the program was wildly successful. I think there are opportunities for improvements and enhancements in the future, and we can live and learn from that. But we accomplished the goal. We got needy businesses money in a very timely fashion, and I think we made a big difference. So I commend you guys. Good job.
I just wanted to say, what Chuck said about getting the word out there. And literally, Lisa and I were boots on the ground downtown, passing that application out, all over town, really. I guess next time, maybe, I thought I had a great understanding of the grant, but in the long run, I would say maybe I didn't, because when the list came out and there were a few on there, and I had similar businesses on my membership list that I did not get that list out to because I didn't feel that they qualified. And so I had a lot of guilt after that, because they were like, hey, how come you didn't tell me about this? Or I saw it, but I didn't think I would qualify. And, so I was like, I admitted that was my own fault. I'm like, I guess I didn't have a great understanding of the grant because I didn't feel like they were in that category, and they were, and hindsight. So, but for the most part, it was, we got the privilege of delivering those checks, and it was amazing, very emotional. It was, very successful, like Lori said.
I think we've got time as we go through this to run scenarios, to look at the different categories. Maybe you want to look at the categories our businesses would fit in, and look at how it could be grouped. I think what we had was, can you imagine if when Henry Ford created the Model T, that it stopped there and we were all still driving Model Ts? It kept being refined, and even today our vehicles are being refined. No matter what our product is, that some of them, as soon as you buy them, they're obsolete, because we're continuing to refine to make the products more user-friendly, more adaptable, more broad. We just started with a Model T emergency grant plan. It's not the end, but it's a start. Now we'll take it and we'll look at it. You'll dissect it, you'll take it apart, you'll put it back together, it'll come out better, then you're going to take it apart again. And as we keep going through these, unfortunately, I'm afraid we're going to have other situations come along that will keep taking it apart. And who knows in 5 years, 10 years, what the plan would be, how we can use it, how we can meet the needs of our businesses. But I think that's where we are. we hit the road running. We got it going. It worked. It didn't work 100%, but it worked. And now we're going to refine it. That's your task to take it apart and improve. I think, we've got such diversity in the advisory board that the talents there is going to pay off, and we're going to get a more workable plan for the next time. And if we can get to a point we don't need it, but we're going to have it ready if we need it. And I thank you guys for taking the time to dedicate to get something to put together so quickly. And with the constraints we had, we couldn't have a meeting. The meetings were done over the telephone or the computer, and the evaluation process, it was different. But the discussion that we had through the process, there was an open dialogue. Everyone, I felt, that was able to express their opinion, and even if we had different ideas, it was open and was received, and decisions were made. So it worked. It worked. So, any other thoughts?
The only thing I would say, Mayor, is that to your earlier comment about the uncertainty in the future and the potential for developing some sort of funding mechanism for future programs, however they may manifest themselves to help our existing businesses, that might be something the commission can talk more about at a future meeting, about maybe some allocation of the budget in some fashion to replenish some of the funds we spent. We were fortunate to have those funds there this time, but we spent them. The uncertainty of what will happen in the future, not only for this year, but in subsequent years, I think our experience in the last few months has taught us that we just need to be prepared for the things we can't anticipate. And the mechanism we put in place to deal with this, I think, is a good, as you pointed out, a good starting point, but it does need to evolve with the goal of stabilizing and expanding our existing business base. And to the Economic Advisory Board members, your comments about their openness and their willing to discuss things and open to diverse opinions and things like that, I think it's a real testament to they're really focused on the business community and making it strong and stronger. There's no really no personal agendas, no self-serving points of view. Everyone's really got a servant type way of going about things, and really focused on keeping Independence a strong business center in Southeast Kansas, as it has been, and we want to work very hard that it continues to be such. I just can't give enough accolades to the cooperation and the commitment that they've all made to make this happen. And I know the commitment they'll show in the future to make any future required programs even stronger than the first attempt we had at it. So thanks to all of them.
When we first started discussing about reforming the Economic Development Advisory Board, it was over a period of time, and we looked and we discussed how the board had functioned in the past and some of its accomplishments and everything. And finally, once at the start of the year, when we looked at making recommendations on who to sit on the committee and diversity and its purpose, you accomplished, I think, the vision that we had. You know, not looking at a typical economic development group of going out and trying to find businesses that we could attract here, but your first task did preserve the businesses that we had. And, you know, it really fit the need, and I see the direction that you guys are willing to go is going to really strengthen independence as a business center. And so in your future meetings, if you would start brainstorming, taking notes, and put this together so you can come back with recommendations. If we need to meet again, that we'll set up special meetings, work sessions that we can discuss and build it as you develop it. But Commissioners, Commissioner Hayes, you've got.
I would encourage you, as you develop any of your criteria or parameters for this, that you keep in mind that metrics that are already in work for many of these businesses are better to measure by, and, you know, things that are easy to count, like income or square footage or payroll. Those types of metrics are easier for them to respond to us when we ask for qualifications for these type of funding opportunities. So keep in mind that if they're already measuring it, it's likely that it would be available for them and easy for them to respond. But also keep in mind that there are other vehicles besides grants that we have utilized and we could utilize in terms of encouraging growth and economic development, including we've worked with a forgivable loan structure. We've worked with a short-term funding for startups that could be set up on a payback schedule with favorable interest rates, those kinds of things. So I was thinking that we're not just talking about grants here, but we're talking about other vehicles for economic development and growth of economic activity.
Yeah. Yeah, again, like you said, not only grants, but loan programs, bring the ideas in. Commissioner Ususi?
I'm in agreement with both of you. Over the last summer, I had a chance to look at that Block 22 over at Pittsburgh and looked at some of their programs that they had set up. I got to actually go one afternoon and view a couple of the facilities that were the outcome of that. But I looked at some of the programs that they had set up, land bank, forgivable loans, a multitude of ideas that they had put together that they made available to small businesses. And I believe, if I'm going by memory, but that Block 22, I think the city of Pittsburgh, I think they've got 9 startups out of that, at least 9 startups out of that Block 22 and that whole process, which in southeast Kansas, you might get 12 to 15 startups in a year. They got 9 from that development, and it was a huge investment by not only, it was $1.5 million by the city of Pittsburgh, but Pitt State was also involved in it, and then they had a group out of Springfield that made a commitment of $10.5 million. It was a $15 million project, if I remember right. So there were a lot of processes involved, and so there are programs out there that if we haven't identified, they're out there that we can bring to the table and incorporate here in our community. So.
And one thing is important, it's probably the hardest, is if you think that we don't understand your point or we disagree, please keep bringing it to us to explain. I guess I need to admit that very first, when we had our conference call, I was not on board with the program at all. I didn't think we could do it, but Chuck shared and kept explaining, and I kept listening. And, you know, if he had given up, I don't know where I would have been, but, you know, I'm willing to listen. And I think that's the thing that we've got to make sure we all understand. And if somebody gets hard-headed at first, please keep explaining, because Chuck bared with me and kept explaining the process. I kept sharing my concerns, and I'm pleased with the outcome. The program was a lot broader than what we started with, and I think what I've heard, everyone is pleased with it, and I'm glad that I listened to what was being explained, because it did make an impact, and it was a successful first program. So thank you for the time on the conference call to keep explaining, Chuck.
Well, I have to admit, Mayor, I'd only had heard rumors of how hard-headed you could be, but, and I didn't believe them, they could be true, but it was challenging, but we gradually broke through, made progress, and appreciate your flexibility.
Now, Charlotte says that comes with the name Kaflish. And I'm not arguing, I'm not saying she's wrong, because I've got a daughter and I got a son, I got a granddaughter that just this afternoon I was advising her how to put a decal on the window of her car. I told her how I would do it, and she said, well, I'm doing it. So this is how I'm doing it, and it's working, isn't it? And I said, yep, maybe it is that Kaflish that we do, but no, I'm not denying it, but I appreciate the patience that you took to keep explaining, because I think we accomplished what needed to be done, and sometimes, you know, when we hear something new, we only see the problems, and we need somebody to come along and say, well, here's how it can work, and then listen to the problem that we can get it solved. And so, any other points, any other comments? Does the committee have any suggestions for the commission? Anything you want to tell us?
The only thing that comes to mind is based on what we've discussed today and the communication and things, and I think it was you that made the point that some folks in the business community have a different perception of what the relationship between themselves and the city and economic development organizations has been in the past. And I think anything we can do in the future to try to further develop that as a partnership, the word you chose, which I think is appropriate, because we are all in this together. As Independence succeeds, all of us succeed. We want our citizens to have a high quality of life. A high quality of life depends on jobs. It depends on the availability of products and services. And anything we can do to foster a positive environment for all that to be successful, I think, is to all of our benefits. And if we can just come up with ways to foster that partnership attitude, I think we'll all be better off for it. So,
I wondered what would happen if we have a forum or a work session with your board, commission, but then similar to like Lisa and Tabitha have been doing, meeting with the restaurants and the retail, that we could look at having a meeting with the industries that they could come in and share with us ideas, their direction, what their needs are, that we could take and look at how we can develop a program and do the same with the retail businesses, hospitality business, and just look at how we could have a one-on-one with them. Keep the groups small enough that we could actually have a dialogue and start taking that to build a program that would meet their needs and develop a rapport with them so they would be more open to come to us.
I think that's a great idea for our future efforts. We need to be responding based on the environment and data, and that's where you get it by visiting with those folks and finding out what issues they're dealing with and trying to find out if there's anything we can do to help mitigate that. So I think that's a great idea, and something maybe we can do in future meetings is target a segment or two and invite 2 or 3 folks from each segment to come visit with us and kind of bring us up to speed on the challenges they're dealing with presently and the challenges that they foresee in the future, so that if there's anything we can put together to help them with that, we can get started on it sooner rather than later.
Anything else for the commission you'd like to share with us? Commissioners?
Is there anyone on the phone that would like to speak to us?
I'll quickly chime in. This is Tricia Purdon with Montgomery County Action Council.
Hi, Tricia.
I couldn't be there in person today. I do want to say that in response to Mayor Kaflish's comment just now, that's been my role in our team between me, Lisa, and Tabitha of contacting the industries and larger businesses and making sure they're aware of some of the programs that they're eligible for. And although they definitely were not eligible for the City of Independence grant, they have been eligible for other programs to help them through this process. And so we have been assisting them as well. And I think that, maybe this summer when things hopefully have eased up a little bit, I think a roundtable discussion might be better for them. But I think right now, with everything easing up, they're probably all, from what I'm hearing so far this week already, they're all swamped just trying to get back into the swing of things at this point. But I think that's a really good idea moving forward.
Yeah, things are still adjusting from getting supplies from China to dealing with health issues. So yeah, it would be best to wait till things stabilize.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, especially with those that have large export markets and import markets, for that matter, for their raw goods. There's certainly issues related to that that there's really no way to get around at this point. So, but we are doing a survey using Synchronous, which is our business retention and expansion software system that Montgomery County Action Council uses. And the company that produces that software has a national disaster recovery system team. And we sent out the first round of surveys. We got 74 responses in Montgomery County. Many of those were our larger manufacturers that responded to that survey. So we have that data of what the condition those businesses look like. And then I'm actually been working on all day is getting ready to do round 2 of that survey. That will go out hopefully by the end of this week, if we can get that out on Synchronous. So we'll have some raw data of what it looks like, and it's aggregated, so it won't identify specific businesses, but will give us a pretty good idea of what's happening on the industry side as well.
Is the survey mainly for manufacturing or industry? Does it include surveys for the retail, the hospitality industry, the smaller manufacturers?
It covers all businesses, and there's a question in the survey that asks what type of business they are. So we'll have that data that says, well, this is a manufacturing business, and here's your impact. Here's a retail business, and here's the impact. Here's a restaurant, and here's the impact. That's what the first round of surveys, how the questions came out. And so that was really helpful data to use
Good.
so far.
Good. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mayor, would it be possible just to, for the purpose of the minutes, so that we know who's on the phone, if there's other members on the phone, that I can mark them as present at the meeting?
Good.
Other than Trish, are there any other members of the Economic Development Advisory Board on the phone?
Yeah, this is Paul Yerlowski. I'm here on the phone.
Okay. Anyone else? That's it.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Well, I don't want to carry on if we've got everything covered just to consume everyone's time. I do appreciate everyone coming, but one last opportunity to share. If not, I'll turn the advisory board over to Chuck.
We'd ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting of the Economic Advisory Board. Been moved. Is there a second? Moved by Wayne, second by Lori. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all for being here.
So we will continue with the special commission meeting. If you want to recess for a moment, allow the Economic Advisory Board to gather up and leave, then we'll resume. Okay, we'll go ahead and resume our special commission meeting with items for commission action. Consider relocating the farmer's market to the parking lot at the southeast corner of Chestnut and 8th Street.
Mayor, with the current COVID situation, it would be advantageous to be able to spread the vendors around for the farmer's market. You might recall in future plans, the reason the city purchased that lot that was adjoining that parking lot is so that at some point in time, they could put a plaza or something like that there to move the farmer's market to, or have other activities. With this current situation, we would like to recommend that it would be moved to that location, and also Anna Mae's is agreed to open their restroom facility for that, so it would be handy for that as well. And then we have a committee that Tabitha and April and Lisa and several are part of, Lacey, to also help work that with Carolyn Torrance. She has worked really hard. She's done a lot of work on it, and she just needs a little extra help. So they are working on that as well, so that it doesn't just fall on, a few people to organize. So the first step is getting approval to move. Tentatively, I'd like to start at May 16th if we can get everything together. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Is the farmers market sponsored by the chamber or Main Street, or is it a separate entity?
They have their own group, correct? They have their own kind of little organization, but I don't think there's too many involved in that, so it's expanding.
The ones that have been on it have been on the Main Street Board, Todd Young, Carolyn, can't remember the other. But they're not under us, but we've always helped out when Carolyn is unavailable.
Yeah. You need to use the,
Yes. So they're not under us, but we do help out whenever Carolyn needs help and is unavailable. We've always been there to do backup for her. So by expanding with the bigger committee, it would be very helpful.
Okay. So you're taking the existing farmers market committee and just expanding. So
Yes.
I thought it was part of either Chamber or Main Street all along. I didn't realize it was a separate, but that's good. It makes it easier with the more involved, take the load off of one person.
Definitely, since it's every Saturday, it kind of takes your whole summer if one person is doing
Yeah.
it, so.
It does. Commissioner Hayes?
Is it our intention then to close that parking lot for parking at some point in time prior to the farmer's market, so those lots, those spaces would be available?
It would depend on how many spaces are needed, and then they would have spaces identified for the vendors, and it may not take up the whole parking lot. It just depends on how many vendors are participating. There's a grassy area, and if it's not muddy and we're able to, you could have some vendors set up in that area. So I think it's just all going to depend on how many vendors they are and how it needs to be set up to get the proper distancing.
So they would, somehow they would notify how much of the parking lot to close off on a weekly basis?
Well, that's all things to be worked out, but a lot of it has to do with, like I said, the number of people that participate. Like, I would anticipate they'd have a plan if they had 10 vendors or if they had 15, then here's the plan. And you would set those plans up so you would know how to set it up ahead of time based on the number of vendors. And then people come there and they just assign them where their spot is. Is how I would anticipate they would do that.
We've done it downtown. It's first come, first served. So whoever shows up, we kind of had like the front half blocked off, and then if more showed up, we'd move the barricade down some. So I anticipate it being kind of the same way. We could block off one area, and if more show up, so if more show up, then we would just open it up more and more. So, but I don't know that on a Saturday morning that early that there would be, say start coming about 6:30, that there would be too many cars parked back there.
So it all depends on just getting advance notice from the vendors so that they can set up an adequate amount of space for the vendors for that day, and then the rest of the parking lot would be released for parking as usual.
Yes, if there was space available.
Well,
Yes.
Yes.
What you would use is like, you'd start with like the south aisle and the parking on that side, so the north parking spaces would remain open, and then as it grew or became full, then you'd use the north aisle. So there could still be parking lot. Usually, it took about a half a block on Myrtle, didn't it? So one aisle would be about the same distance that they had.
Right.
So there's potential to still, at this point, unless it grew, you could still have half the parking lot being utilized, so. Okay. Commissioner Ususi?
That sounds like a good plan to me, and with 75 going right through that, you might actually pick up more people as they drive by seeing it. The vendors there, and out of curiosity, stop and see what they were selling and buy. There was a time when I like desserts. I did like desserts. I still do. I just can't eat much of them anymore. That's another story altogether. But I would always look to see if somebody was selling pies, apple pie or lemon pie or whatever. So, of course, those days are over. But just you seeing it as you're driving by, curiosity, you want to pull in to see what it's all about. So maybe we'll have more participants that way.
I think we will. Being downtown, if you're not driving downtown early on Saturday morning, you really didn't see it or you forgot about it because there's not a lot of businesses open that early. I think some of them open at 10 on a Saturday morning. That gave them 30 minutes for the market, and by then the regulars have already picked over the good stuff. So I definitely think by moving it out there with the traffic, even if you're running an errand and you drive by, oh yeah, there it is right there. Like I say, right downtown that time in the morning is just not a really busy area.
So this will, the initiation of this will be the permanent place, at least for the foreseeable future, for the farmer's market then?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further questions?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm good.
Okay, if there's no further questions, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to locate the farmer's market to the parking lot at the southeast corner of Chestnut and 8th Street.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carried. Next item, item B, consider reopening plan for city services and facilities that are disrupted during the COVID-19 pandemic.
And Mayor, the document I provided you, we put together a summary of what the state has. Actually, another community had done this, so we kind of copied their format because we thought it was easy to read. Then we also have the county guidelines in here for a copy of that. And then the last page is the city reopening plan, which I'll get to on the PowerPoint here. And basically, we start out City Hall lobby, and I want to bring to your attention, and Lacey's here, and I will let her respond to this. She is wanting, when we reopen, to readjust the hours, 8 to 12 and 1 to 5. It would be closed phase 1. They're finishing up the wall, and we're actually getting glass installed in some areas that we can meet with people and have a proper barrier between us and the citizens, and that's still in process, but it will be done by the phase 2, which is May 18th at the earliest date, and we have 50% capacity of that lobby area. We're going to have David is going to determine what that amount is, plus they'll do the social distancing. Phase 3 would go to 75%, and phase 4 would be open. And I'll let Lacey explain why she's wanting to modify the hours. Lacey?
Are there questions on it?
Yeah, the capacity of the lobby, is the lobby just used for those coming in to pay their bills?
Or going through, they can open that other door, and they might be waiting out there to meet with somebody in one of the stations. There's a button that they're going to be able to open that door to let them go back. So that kind of would be a waiting area, and then also people paying their bills.
And for city court?
City court, they might be waiting there. Also, city court's going to be in one of the old OR rooms. We're setting that up there, and so they would have to be buzzed back on court days. We are modifying court days to just once a week instead of 3 times a week. It will just be on Wednesdays, starting in June, and so that's going to be something new. So that's only going to be 1 day a week that we will have court.
So really, there's not going to be a lot of people in the lobby, even
Not most of the, no.
even at its maximum. You're only looking 3 or 4 people, 5.
We rarely have over 5 people in the
Yeah.
lobby. That's on a rare occasion.
Yeah. Percentages sound big, reality numbers aren't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We're not.
But this way it gives you opportunity to get things used to the new system. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Lacey, did you want to add anything on?
On the hours?
Yes.
And that decision was based off of, during this time, a lot of people have set up automatic payment methods, or there are so many alternate ways to pay your bill. Really so the 1 hour lunch break that we are taking, it's really we won't be taking cash payments at that time. You can still come in and drop, through the Dropbox, pay online, pay over the phone, which most people now are paying over the phone, and we've waived that fee. So by having that consistent lunch break, it reduces the number of cash drawers that I have to have open. We've readjusted some positions, so I am down 1 staff So it makes my operations a lot easier and makes certain safeguards and separation of duties easier to have one person that is in charge of taking cash payments instead of having to rotate through a lunch period with a reduced staff. And also, you would think it's a busy time for us, but it's really not our busiest time of the day. So I don't foresee a huge demand during that time anyway.
At one time, it's been maybe 3 years ago, we brought in to the commission to alter the hours that I think, was it open earlier before 8 and
Yeah, they
then
had certain
stayed?
days open earlier and a few that were started later and things like that. I think it was when Jen Rutledge was the city clerk. I think she tried that.
And that's not needed now, that this is working
She
8 to
didn't-
5 is
I've
a
asked my
better
staff
function.
about that, and they said that they really there wasn't a high demand during those hours, so that's why they went back to the normal 8 to 5.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's always good to look at what works instead of look at tradition. That's good, okay.
So then also the airport, they modified their hours slightly just during the Textron furlough. We had some short staff issues there for a little while, and so they modified their hours. And when Textron gets back up to full force and back open, then they will go back to their old hours. We do have self-serve out there. If you are getting avgas, you could get it yourself. And then if you need Jet A, there's a number you can call, and then the staff goes out there and takes care of that. So it doesn't mean you can't get fuel outside those hours. The zoo would be closed in phase 1 and then open in phase 2 except for the Stevens building. That's kind of a pretty small area, and we just were concerned if it was warm outside, people could congregate in there and have a little bit more than you anticipate. So we plan on opening it up in phase 3, which is no earlier than June 1st. The park playground would be closed phase 1, open in phase 2, and that's following the governor's plan. Park concessions would be closed phase 1 and 2 and opened in phase 3. Park rides, the same, would open in phase 3. And then the swimming pool is kind of up in the air right now. They don't normally open till Memorial Day, that area anyway, so it would be phase 3 regardless. Terry is still trying to get, he's ordered a pump, it's several weeks out. He's trying to get parts for an existing pump to try to get it working. He's going to check with some local companies to see if there's anybody that could help us get that going, but they're having trouble getting this main pump, and if that pump doesn't run, they can't open the pool. So we're still waiting on some information on that. So a lot of that hinges on that. And then also we had a conference call with Brent today and the chair of the Rec Commission, and they said where they get their certification for the lifeguards, they're not doing that certification training. So if they can't get enough people that were held over from last year with the certification training, they wouldn't have enough lifeguards to open up the pool also. So that's another issue that we may run into. So that's kind of the challenges we're dealing with the pool right now. So it's kind of complex. It's kind of threefold between the COVID situation and then the training and then the pump issue. So that one we're going to have to get back with you when we have more information. Memorial Hall closed phase 1. Phase 2 would be the same as we're doing like for the lobby, and this would be per rentable space. So 50% capacity, 75% phase 3, and open completely phase 4. And the reason we did that for Memorial Hall versus what we did with the park buildings is the park buildings, the people that rent that, the staff are not present when they're having those activities. Those people that rent it, they would be responsible to determine and make sure that their private activity is following the guidelines. And we just, we weren't going to be able to monitor what they're doing. They're usually private functions. In this building, we always have someone monitoring activity, so it's a little different. So that was kind of the difference there. First Saturday recycling will resume in June, which is phase 3. The every Tuesday recycling has remained. It's still open every phase, but I just put that on there because we had the Saturday, and I thought it'd be good reference so people were aware of that. There were some police services that were restricted, like VIN checks, things like that, and those will be lifted phase 3. They will go back to doing those like they did previously. Farmers market is essential, has not been restricted. Rummage sales the same way. I talked to Rick, and he said those are outside and they're not restricted, so we're still issuing licenses for those. The Ash Youth Center, I talked to Brent, and he said that they're closed phase 1, and their board has not met and decided what they're doing in the future phases. When I get that information, I will add that to the table. Organized sports, same way. They're not sure what they're going to do. There's some concerns about, if you can't social distance, then there's maximums on how many people you can have, and they're concerned that those numbers for practices and things would exceed those recommended guidelines or guidelines from the state. So they're not sure what they're doing. They may do it later in the year. They're just not sure at this point. Penn Terrace will be closed to visitors through phase 2 and opened back up June 1st. As far as we know, she's going to check with her board to verify that. So it's anticipated that might happen, but she has to visit with her board and let them make that decision on what they do there. The library closed phase 1. They're doing curbside delivery phase 2. And then phase 3, same thing. She wants to visit with her board to see how they want to progress from there. And I want to bring out the language at the bottom. All above subject to following mass gatherings, social distancing, sanitation guidelines established by federal and state entities, including but not limited to. A temperature below 100.4 must be documented, and hand sanitizers are utilized at wellness stations provided near entry points before employees move further into city facilities. Masks are required for employees if within 6 feet of any other individual not living in the same household for 10 minutes or more. Individuals utilizing city facilities are responsible to ensure that attendees are following mass gathering, social distancing, and sanitation guidelines. Members of the public entering the city facilities are encouraged to ensure they are not running a temperature of 100.4 or above, and to wear a mask if they will be within 6 feet of other individuals not residing in the same household for 10 minutes or more. Mass gatherings are defined as instances in which individuals are in one location and are unable to maintain 6 feet of distance between individuals. Mass gathering limitations are set at 10 for phase 1, 30 for phase 2, and 90 for phase 3. There has been some confusion because they thought, well, you can't have something more than that amount. You can have it if you can maintain the distance, just like in this room. We can have more 10. We're in phase 1, which the limit is 10, but since we can distance people out and meet that social distancing, we can exceed that amount. If you couldn't exceed that, then you would be limited to the 10. So, are there any questions or comments?
On the playground equipment, being that it's going to be open on phase 2, then
Yes.
encouraging people to bring their own hand sanitizer, cleaner. If the kids are going to be playing on the equipment, I mean, they'll have to take the responsibility to make sure that they
We would always encourage that.
do everything
There's
that they need to do.
restrooms open at the park that they can
Right.
wash their hands, and then they will be, the park staff can't sanitize them every time they're used, but they will be sanitized as much as they can. They're gonna get a sprayer type thing that they can do it quickly. They can quickly sanitize an area or piece of equipment or whatever. And when they open the rides, they're gonna have to do that as well. So, there's gonna be a new process. It's gonna take a little longer, in between to make sure that we try to keep everything as safe as possible, but still bring those things out and let people enjoy those amenities. I think it's important to, everybody's quality of life and mental health, to get these open as soon as we can, but in a safe manner.
And on the Riverside Beach,
Yes.
Is the motor itself, it's not, we're just waiting on parts. It's not a motor that needs to be rebuilt, or it can't be rebuilt because of age, or?
Terry, are you on the phone? I don't hear him. He had ordered a new pump. We had been trying to get parts. We had a pool meeting in January, and at that point, he had been trying for 3 weeks to get parts, and they've been keep pushing them off on what, I guess these parts are difficult to come by. And so then he finally said, well, we're just going to order a new one, but then the new pump is several weeks out. So that's kind of the situation that we were in. I know Terry's been trying to get it fixed, but and of course, at one time, you need to remember, this has kind of been a fluid situation. We kind of started in this thing, we thought there was a possibility it might not open at all, because, we just didn't know. There was, at some point, they were, when this started, they were kind of predicting that this thing was going to go through, be more restrictive for a longer period of time. So it's just kind of, it changes constantly, but now that we have the governor's plan, we're going to do what we can to get it going. It's not for lack of effort. And like I said, Brent has challenges on the lifeguard side as well.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
So on the park rides in phase 3, there's still social distancing, isn't there?
There is if you're not over that amount. So phase 3 is like, what, 90? So social distancing's, that's if you can't social distance, then the maximum number is 90. You're still going to encourage people to separate, if they can, but according to this.
But on the train and the merry-go-round, people can sit right next to each other, even though they're not related or anything.
Well, reading what the definition says, mass gatherings are defined as instances in which individuals are in one location and are unable to maintain 6 feet of distance between individuals. And phase 3 is 90. This is right out of the state's plan. But I still would think most people are going to try to keep separate, I would imagine, for a while.
One of the things that's important to understand is that all of these phases in this plan are predicated on individual behaviors that have developed over the course of the last few weeks as we have learned how to live into COVID-19. So those individual behaviors cannot be abandoned no matter what phase that you're in. You need to wash your hands frequently. You need to use hand sanitizers. You need to be wearing the mask. You need to watch your own personal behaviors and cough into your sleeve and to stay home if you're feeling ill. All of that is kind of the foundation and baseline for the rest of this plan. So those individual behaviors are paramount for us to get from phase 1 to phase 2, much less to get all the way through this.
Yeah, because these are just the earliest dates, and if we have several outbreaks, these are going to get pushed into the future. So we might not get to phase 3 June 1st. It's just the earliest date.
It seems like with the train and the merry-go-round, to try and sanitize the horses and the train in between shifts or any sessions of the ride, it's really difficult. So, we're doing a lot of social distancing, a lot of cleansing, but then when it comes to those rides, it's not going to be practical. We're just going to go back to the old way.
Barb would like to get these sprayers that in between rides she can go around and spray to give them some sanitation level. People will have to also be responsible for their own, as well.
And then you'd have to dry the rides off.
Well, she's found something that apparently it dries pretty fast. A lot of it will depend on the weather too, on how fast.
Yeah.
If it's a really hot day, it's
Like
not
a
going to take
windy
long. And some of those, the train gets pretty hot. It may kind of self-sanitize if it gets out in the sun.
Yeah.
But this is our plan. I don't know if you have any comments or anything you think that needs to be modified. We've ran this through our admin team, our leadership team, our community pandemic team. I've talked to the library, the Recreation Commission, Housing Authority. So if you have any additional modifications,
So if somebody rents a building, are they gonna have to have a station set up at the door with a thermometer and record, or is
Well,
this
it
just a
says-
recommendation?
it says recommendation that they
Yeah.
don't have a fever. You know, people, I would think before they go to the event, they're gonna take their
Definitely.
temperature at home or know if they're sick. We did talk about providing hand sanitizer. I'd like to get wall mounted so they don't disappear as easy, so that they're actually mounted in the buildings, and that's just part of the buildings from now on, that we're gonna have that hand sanitizer there. And I think, that will help a lot, but, we can't monitor everybody taking their temperature, and that's why
No.
we changed it to our employees. We can control what our employees do, but it's a little more difficult to control what the public does. We can make suggestions, but it's not as easily enforceable.
Any questions, commissioners?
I'm good.
I'm good, Leonard.
And what I take, Kelly, is you're not asking us as much to adopt it, but you wanted to inform us and just give us the opportunity, if we've got a problem with it, to speak up and share that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do a motion to adopt it, you can do that, but I mean, or I can just implement it. I've been implementing the other modifications. It's more operations. But I know this is something unusual from what we normally deal with, so this is the plan that I'm planning on proceeding with.
I think instead of adopting it, because we are looking at a situation that could change, it's just, I asked the commissioners if they're in agreement and approve of the direction that the reopening schedule is going. Is that consensus with the commission?
I'm good.
I'm good as well, understanding, of course, that tomorrow may bring new information, and we'll have to incorporate that as well.
And we'll modify it as we get more information, and then when I get information from those other entities, if we get pushed back in phases, we'll redate it. But we wanted something simple we could get out to the public that's easy to just look at and understand without having to read several pages to figure out what's going on where.
Looks good to me.
Very
you.
simple. The only thing, as it modifies, if you'd update us with,
Oh,
send a
absolutely.
copy, and I think that would be good. I just, to go to an adoption of a formal, might be a little too much, but
Right.
we're in agreement.
Okay, I appreciate it.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a question, since we're here and David's here in the room, because we did talk about this reopening phase in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dave, do you have any news for us today as far as numbers or anything that you'd like to pass on before we adjourn today?
I just saw Rick posted the numbers, and we're still at 20 for today. During our call this morning, Becky updated us that they continue to do several tests a day at our ER. To get a test requires you to have a symptom, and those tests, as of today, are continuing to come back negative. I think I can tell you, the commission, because I know we receive this daily. When is testing coming to the community? And that is a big question that is being asked of us, and we are reaching back out to Rick of when those testings can become available. I believe he spoke to you guys last week about that vehicle that could possibly come to town. That is a big request we are getting from the community, and we continue to get a lot of questions. Lisa gets them, I get them, on what can we do? What are the rules? Is it safe for me to come out or not? And I am sticking by the guidance. If you are 60 years old or older, you need to take extreme caution, or if you have one of those illnesses, please be very cautious to come out and what you're doing, follow the social distancing, the hand washing, all of those, because you're just at a very vulnerable risk until we can get this testing done. So we're just continuing to work with that. Other than that, there is not a lot of updates at this time.
All right, thank you, David.
The key is to protect yourself, to keep from getting it. Sanitizing your hands, washing your hands, mask, distancing, watching where you go, being around people with a fever. And that's much better than the test. If you take the test, I think they're still waiting for you to have actual symptoms. So at that point, it's too late.
I think the encouraging thing is our numbers throughout this whole time, we have stayed, we went up to 10 or 12 and we plateaued. And a lot of those numbers happened early in it. So a lot of those people are probably healthy. Of course, not all those people were from Independence. And so we're looking at a county. But the concern is, and I'm sure you all understand this, there are those that do not show any symptoms that could be in our community. And that's the unknown and the scary part. That's why testing would be so helpful.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Back on the farmer's market, I forgot to add one item on that. We would like permission to put signage in the right-of-way for the day of that event. I know, I'm sorry.
On the right-of-way? Are you serious?
We do it during the highway sale. They will put sign in the right-of-way just for that advertising.
Remember what Chuck said about you earlier.
It's not, these are not signs for the city's personal gain, though. It'd be similar to what they do on the highway sale that just directs people that come into town to where the farmer's market is.
I never understood why you couldn't put them out there anyway.
Well, you guys can change that if you want to. I mean, I'm sure the
Yeah.
code enforcement officer's getting tired of picking them up.
Yeah.
Do you need a separate motion for that?
I do, because it is city code.
Now, let's not do it so Chief Harrison can go Saturday and remove all the farmers market signs off the right-of-way.
Uh-oh.
Because he has nothing else to do?
That's right.
That's my favorite thing to do on Saturday morning. Is it all right if I get my load of vegetables before I do that?
Of course.
Okay, then I'm in. Yeah.
These are directional signage.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I make a motion that we authorize the farmers market to place directional signs in the right-of-way.
And informational.
Informational and directional signs in the right-of-way for the weekly farmers market. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
That wasn't hard, was it?
Oh. I think that brings us to adjournment. I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.